Hello and welcome to the Royal Central podcast from royalcentral.co.uk. I'm Lydia Starbuck, Associate Editor.
I'm Brittani Barger and I'm the Deputy Editor.
I'm Jess. I'm Senior Royal Reporter and Editorial Assistant.
And we have a special guest this week.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Deb Stratas. I'm an author from Canada and I'm a royal lover and I've written 4 books about Diana and really happy to be here today. Thank you.
And we're really happy that you've joined us. And Deb has given you a clue there about what our special podcast is all about. We are talking today about Diana, Princess of Wales. This month, Diana would have turned 60. We're marking the 60th anniversary of her birth. And in the last few days, that was marked in a very special way by her sons, who unveiled a new statue of her in Kensington Palace, her former home. So what did we all think of the statue? We waited so long to see it. There it was, beneath the green tarpaulin, revealed to us by William and Harry in a very low-key, dignified ceremony.
I think it looks a lot like her, which I think that's always a concern when we've seen other statues that don't quite turn out how we thought they should. I think it's a nice tribute to her. Her love of children, so that's reflected with the kids that she has her arms around and everything. So I think it's a nice tribute to her, especially being in the Sunken Garden, which was one of her favorite places at Kensington Palace.
I'm also a fan of it. I like that it focuses on the woman and not, like, she's not dressed up in regalia or a gown. It's her dressed down. And I think some people on Twitter found, like, the exact outfit that it was based on, where she was going to a charity meeting. So I really like that William and Harry focused on more of their mother as the person and her compassion and having the children surrounding her, showing that side of her instead of like the portrait with the orb and the scepter or the crown or whatever.
Yeah, it would have been nice to see a tiara and gown moment, I think, in some ways. But obviously this is what William and Harry wanted, so that's the most important thing. And she did look more casual. I thought it was timeless, which is also hard to do with statues. We'll see what future generations think of the outfit, Jess, as you mentioned, people had seen. I would say the one maybe criticism I would have is I feel like the shoulders looked a bit too big to me. I don't know if you guys noticed that or not. I feel like she was a little slimmer there. But overall, I thought it was a terrific likeness, and the artist did a really great job.
Yeah, I
thought it was a good likeness, and I did like the fact that she had the children around her, because I thought, as well as being a physical likeness, it was a good encapsulation of how the world saw Diana and how Diana saw herself in that last stage of her life, that kind of eternal memory we have of her. It did seem to be kind of an actual physical representation of what Diana was about as she made her way in her kind of post-royal life.
I think it also was a bit evocative of way back in the day when she was a nanny, working at Young England Kindergarten. That famous picture.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, of her holding the children with the sun behind her. So it kind of, it was a timeless view again from that perspective. Yeah.
And it has a feel, I don't know if anyone travels through Liverpool Street station in London, probably not as much as me because I live closest to it, but there is a statue in there called Für das Kind, which is a memorial to the children who were evacuated to England from Germany during the Second World War. And it reminds me a huge amount of that in its styling, in the focus on youth, on the focus of emotion and kind of support, community support. That's the first thing I thought of when I saw that. There's quite a few statues like that around the UK, and it seemed to be that focus on youth that really came through.
Yeah, can't wait to see it the next time I come to London.
It won't be long, I'm sure. But Brittani, you mentioned it's in the Sunken Garden at Kensington Palace, which was one of Diana's favourite places. We know she loved Kensington Palace, but she really loved that particular garden, which has now been redesigned to house the statue and contains lots of special tributes to her, which kind of makes the statue even more special. I think that this place that meant so much to her has been reshaped to welcome her home, and the statue faces her home, doesn't it? It looks towards Kensington Palace. It looks towards the place that she loved to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I really like that forget-me-nots, her favorite flower, are included in the new redesign, because obviously if that's her favorite flower, that's a good tribute to her too. And there's ballerina roses, and obviously that was her dream at one point. So it's a very, very nice tribute, and it was her final home, so it's the perfect location too.
Yeah, and they replanted, I think, or redesigned something like 4,000 new flowers there, which, again, I'm sure is very spectacular and, will be a thing to, admire throughout the whole flowering season.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost and her rollerblade in the park.
There's a link to a childhood there as well, isn't there? Because they've put sweet peas in, and sweet peas were kind of developed in their modern form at Althorp. So Althorp became famous for the Spencer sweet pea, and so they're kind of dotted through the garden. But it's lovely it's there as well, because although, of course, it's Diana's final home, it's somewhere that William and Harry have got very close links with. And obviously William can just pop out into the back garden because that's where he lives. But Harry's obviously always welcome there, used to live there, and may well live there again at some point in the future, depending on how he and Meghan want to base themselves when they do pop back to the UK. So it is a very special place for it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the grandchildren too, right? They can pop over as well, when the public's not around. See their granny.
And I do wonder, have Charlotte, Louis, and George been able to go over there yet, to see this big statue of their granny that they hear so much about, but obviously never had the chance to meet.
Yeah, I think they had a preview. I read that all the Cambridges went to see it before it was publicly unveiled. So I think that the children have seen it as well as Catherine too. Yeah.
If we hadn't had COVID and the current situation that's going on right now, we may have had a bigger reveal where Catherine would have been there with the kids, and may have, if things were in a better place, Meghan would have been there with Archie, and it would have been a lovely way to unveil it. But that's not the world we live in right now. So
yeah. Well, it was very low key also, I think, just even from a Windsor perspective. It's always a bit dicey, the whole Diana issue, with Charles and the Queen. And the Queen was there for the other memorial opening, years ago. But they all, happened to be in Scotland conveniently, so that worked out well. So there's kind of no strife. But yeah, no Wessexes were there either, which would have been nice, because I know Diana and Sophie, I think, were close. They definitely knew each other in the royal family. But they just wanted to keep it very low key, just the two boys, not even Kate. What did you guys think about Kate not being there?
In the end, I think it was the right decision. I think what happened for me was it was all just very low key and ended up being very much focused on Diana. So you just saw William and Harry walking out of the palace. Everyone else was waiting for them. They went over and unveiled the statue. But throughout the whole event, what you were thinking about was Diana, and what you were left with was the image of Diana's statue with her two boys looking at it. And I think, given the circumstances in the run up to the unveiling, it was probably the wisest course of action, I think, just because there's been so much said about, they're going to have a stand-up fight in the pond, are they even going to speak to one another, what's going to happen? It was just all very right, here they are, no one needs to hear them speaking. It was all very polite, all very pleasant. But I think as soon as you add in anyone else, had Kate gone, then of course it opens the door to people saying, well, she shouldn't have gone because Meghan couldn't go because she's just had a baby, and anyone who's just had a baby knows you ain't sitting on a plane for 12 hours if you've just had a baby. It's just not going to happen. She physically couldn't have gone. So I for me, it was very sensible to just have the Duke of Cambridge, the Duke of Sussex, her sisters, her brother, the gardeners who had put all the work into it, the people who had made the statue a reality, because it just took the heat out of everything. And I kind of admire the Windsor PR machine, because I think it did swing into action last week. As you said, Deb, everyone was conveniently up in Scotland, and they only, the last engagement in Scotland had happened 2 hours before William and Harry stepped out into the sunken garden. We didn't see Charles all week. It was all very much kind of like, when this happens, it's about Diana. Yeah, orchestrated.
Yeah.
There's something really poignant too about the photos of Diana's brother and her sisters standing next to the statue. And I think Charles Spencer shared a photo saying that he'd had a great day in Kensington, but just imagining like where Diana would be today, and it was very emotional.
They seemed pretty friendly. I felt like this with the boys, so that was nice to see.
Yeah,
didn't look too frosty.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, and I mean with the Spencers, I mean that's a link to their mother. I mean that's their mother's siblings. So if they want to know what Diana would think about something, there's no better person to call than her sisters, or to just talk about her from when they were younger. I mean, they've got the stories, they've got the memories. They're her siblings, so there's a special bond there when you lose a parent, to talk to the siblings of your parent, because they knew them best. They're able to kind of provide a comfort and everything that other people can't give you.
Yeah, and they've all been so protective of her memory, like the Spencers and William and Harry. They've all, I think, over the last 20-something years, been very, very positive and very good with maintaining her memory and her legacy and not exploiting her. So.
Yeah, when you look at Sarah and Jane, you can't help thinking, I wonder, if Diana would look like that now. Yeah. Because, she was the youngest, but she, was of a similar age to her sisters now. She's frozen in time for all of us, really, at age 36, but, she would have been 60. So, of course, I'm sure she would have aged beautifully, but she would have aged like all of us do. So, she would have probably looked similar to her sisters in some regards. You think?
They all very like their dad. I thought that when you saw all the Spencer siblings together, they are all, the man I call Earl Spencer. I'm showing my age here. For me, he'll always be Earl Spencer. And I always think of Charles as Viscount Althorp, even though that's a long, long time ago. But Earl Spencer, the proud dad who walked her down the aisle in 1981, they're all the living image of him. Those genes are chasing them into old age, aren't they? They really look like their dad. So I imagine Diana probably would have gone that way too, because they're quite similar looking siblings as well, aren't they?
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it must have been hard for Sarah and Jane, well, for all of them, because obviously they're remembering their sibling, but they were older than Diana, and there is something about losing a younger siblings. You shouldn't really see them out the door, and to look on that statue of their little sister. It must be a very hard moment, I think, for all of them. We were all kind of looking at it, with that kind of, is there going to be a row, and what's the statue going to look like, and how's it all going to play out? But for them, it's a proper bolt, isn't it? It's a real kind of tummy turning moment. Yeah,
it brings it all back, and especially the tragic way she died. That's so jarring and shocking even still today. So when it's your sister, your baby sister, it must be doubly harder.
And especially for Charles, the now Earl Spencer, how he and Diana were so close growing up, because they were so close in age, because he was born not right after her, but he's the baby of the family and she's the baby sister of the family. So they had that bond because they really grew up together.
Yeah, totally.
So it's a lovely statue, isn't it? And it all went very well. But Deb, why is Kensington Palace such an appropriate place for it? You've written about Diana's homes and what they meant to her, and what particular bond she had. Why was Kensington so special to her? Because we know it was. We know that it really meant a huge amount to her.
Well, that's where she spent the most time as a royal. So, as you said before, they got married in 1981. And some people don't realize this, but she actually helped to decorate and design all of the rooms at Kensington Palace, as well as Highgrove House, which was their country home for the Waleses for, many years. And of course, is still a favorite of Charles today. So she had a hand in, designing all of the soft cushions and the decor and the paint and so on. And then, she lived there from that time, when she was pregnant with William up until, her death, in 1997. So it was really her home base. She loved London, even though she loved the country. She really was a city girl, I think at heart. And so even though she would, put up with the Balmorals and the Sandringham kind of holidays and vacations, she really liked the London life, the bustling life, and seeing her friends and so on. And then, her children were both born there. So, of course, that's a very special place for a mother, to have, her kids running through the halls and, going down to the kitchen and having friends over. They used to go up to the Kensington High Street, go to the McDonald's and the Marks and Spencer's, and she would make them queue in line. So that was really her normal place, her safe place. She also called it her gilded cage at times, because even though it was safe space for her, she was lonely there, very lonely, especially once her boys were in school and away from her, during the week. And then after the separation and the divorce, she was there alone quite a bit. So, it was a special place. It was her home base, but, I'm sure very mixed memories as well, because it was a sad place when she would do all of her public things and be adored out, at an event, and then come home to a quiet place, and it would just be her and the staff, back at Kensington. But she definitely loved it. I wrote about it, as you mentioned earlier, Brittany, in my book, At Home with Diana, which really talks about all the places that she lived as a royal princess. And it was her, her first and last. So that's why I think some of the reasons why it's very special to her and to us now as well. I mean, who could forget the flowers that were there, after she died in Paris? The wall of flowers, and I'm sure the smell of flowers just filled the streets of London. So it has so many memories for all of us.
It does. It is kind of irrevocably associated with Diana now, isn't it? Because at the moment, Kensington Palace is the home for her wedding dress. That's on display there. But for many people going to visit Kensington Palace, the first draw is Diana. No one is necessarily as interested in the Stuart Kings who created it, or the Hanoverians who have lived there. The first thought is Diana.
Have any of you seen the dress? Have you gone to, Lydia, have you been able to pop over to see the dress at Kensington Palace?
I haven't been to see it yet. It is on the list. I know it's really, really popular. I know Historic Royal Palaces keep saying, make sure you book. Obviously, you've got to book in advance at the moment because of COVID precautions. But, I think the tickets are going like hotcakes. It is, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And we're coming up to the 40th anniversary of the wedding at the end of July, which will make me feel very old. I think Brittani and Jess but I remember the wedding.
Who remembers waking up very, very early to watch it? I certainly do. Yeah.
My mother did too.
I know I actually got to see the dress back, this was a few years ago. Jess and Deb, I'm not sure if it was in Canada. I'm sure it may have been. There was a traveling exhibit that went at least through the United States. And it had so many things, her outfits, just mementos from her childhood, and the wedding dress was included, as was a Spencer tiara, not the one that she wore, but the second one. So I was able to see it in person then in Cincinnati. We drove up there, and you don't realize just how big the dress was until you see it in person, and how tiny she was until you see it in person. It's really it's a historical dress, and it's really something to see it in person.
Yeah, well, you're very lucky. I saw the traveling show as well, but they didn't have the wedding dress in it. So the one that we saw didn't. But yeah, 25-foot long train, the longest in royal history. I often think, by the end of the day, she must have been tired dragging that big long train behind all around Buckingham Palace. But yeah, spectacular. And I had read, Brittany, that when you see it up close, you didn't realize how much sparkle there was to the dress. Did you notice that? That when you see pictures, it doesn't really show that as well as when you see it in person.
And in person, it's a lot prettier and everything than seeing it on TV and the footage and everything. I was more fond of the dress after seeing it in person than just seeing it, with the wedding footage and everything.
That's great. Yeah, well, I think the exhibit goes till January of next year, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it before then. But it's very popular, as you say, Lydia. So maybe they'll bring it back. I think it's the first time the boys have had it out of storage for many, many years. So I'm afraid it's going to be like what we would say in the States, it's like the Disney vault, that it's going to go back inside, and we're not going to see it again for a long time, because it does get quite damaged, right? Those kinds of beautiful dresses and vintage pieces from light and from being handled and all those kinds of things, the air even, I think. So, but yeah, it would be spectacular to see it in person.
And of course, it's really vintage now because, yeah, as we keep saying, Diana's forever caught in time at the age of 36. But actually, that dress was created 40 years ago. It is an historic artifact now. It's that's it. And that's a strange anniversary, isn't it, to mark coming up at the end of July, because obviously it was the beginning of Diana's royal career. I mean, she was announced as Charles's fiancée in February of 1981, and everything changed forever afterwards. And she was literally everywhere. I mean, I was very young when that happened. I'm not that old, but I do remember.
Same.
And magazines everywhere. I mean, it was absolutely everywhere. When people talk now about, oh, well, there's so much focus on the royals, like, go back to 1981 if you can, because the focus there was on Charles and Diana, it was literally non-stop. So by the time they got married, July the 29th, 1981, we were all their best friends. We knew everything there was to know about that wedding. And obviously it made Diana into Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales. It began her royal career, but it became a kind of bittersweet moment, didn't it? Obviously, the marriage ended in divorce and so much acrimony, but it is still a big anniversary. It marks the beginning of a royal life of someone who's perhaps the most famous royal of the 20th century, certainly one of the most famous royals of the 20th century.
Yeah, and she was only 20 years old as well, right? Because her birthday is July 1st, so she was barely out of her teens, when she married the prince. And I always was struck by the fact that she really had a free reign with that dress. So the Emanuels made it for her. They were a young British couple just out of design school. And she didn't have somebody saying to her, no, it must be this length. No, it must be this fabric. No, it must be this designer. So she really was able to indulge her inner fairy princess, to have that dress. And she really thought that the fairy tale was going to last forever, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. I think. Well, yeah. I mean, that was the thing, wasn't it? It was even in the homily at the wedding, the stuff of which fairy tales are made. And of course, we know it didn't quite come true. But William and Harry said in their joint statement, they issued a joint statement, didn't they, for the reveal of the statue, that they want this statue to be her legacy, the legacy of her life. They want it to represent what their mum meant to them and to everybody around the world. And as we approach next year's the 25th anniversary of Diana's death, that's crazy as well, isn't it, when you think she'll have been gone for a quarter of a century. And as you said, Deb, all those scenes of the flowers outside Kensington Palace, when the world seemed to stop, certainly here in the UK, everything stopped for that time. But
just thinking about it, yeah.
I know it is. It's strange. It's very hard to explain to people that didn't live through it. I think I sometimes think that when, like, my son is 8 and he's just taking interest in history, mostly Henry VIII. It has to be said. I don't know what attracts him to Henry VIII with all the kind of weddings and gory dramas, but he does like a bit of Henry VIII. But you kind of think, when you try to explain to someone, kids or grandkids in years to come, how do you explain that? How do you explain Diana was just so famous that her death was so shocking, it literally stopped everything in its tracks, and going towards the anniversary of that, everyone's looking at her legacy. Is her legacy what she would want it to be, do you think, when we see this statue, when we see the focus on children, work with young people, caring for others? Do you think that's the legacy she would have wanted to leave?
I think she probably would have laughed out loud thinking about leaving a legacy. She really was so self-deprecating and liked to have fun, and she cared about so many causes, but she never really saw herself as this sort of superstar that we all saw her as. And like you said, Lydia, we all felt like we knew them when they got married back in 1981, and that just continued and continued. So when she did die, it was like we lost our best friend for a lot of people. It was a shocking thing. For me, I think her legacy is her children. I mean, it has to be, right? Those 2 boys. And so I think she'd be very, very proud of them and their families and the fact that they found love in their lives. So for me, I think as a mom, I think that's what would have been the most important thing Do you agree?
I mean, I'm not a mother, but I agree. I think from seeing, my siblings who have kids and things, that that is what was most important in your life is your kids. And so seeing them succeed and do well, that's all you want. So her legacy is how they're carrying on her some of her causes, but just her personality of wanting to help people and kind of breaking with the royal mold of raising children and getting down on the same level as the kids. Obviously William, Harry, and even Kate and Meghan, they all do that as well. So yeah, I think I agree. I think her legacy really is her children and her grandchildren.
Yeah, I think she'd be very sad that her kids aren't getting along as well as she would have liked, when she was still alive. But she would be so happy that they're both desperately in love with their partners, because that's all she really wanted for herself, right? She really wanted someone to love and adore her, that would take care of her, that she could take care of them. So I think she would be so happy that William and Catherine are still so in love after, how many years they've been married now and have 3 beautiful children, and Harry's found the love of his life. So that, I think, would really make her very proud and happy.
And going forward, Deb, you've kind of been telling Diana's story in many different ways for a number of years now through your books. What's the next chapter? Because we've waited for this statue for so long, haven't we? This was first announced years ago, and it was meant to be for 2017, for the 20th anniversary of her death. And of course, so many things have happened. And so now we finally have the statue. We finally have the commemoration that William and Harry wanted of their mom. How do we now tell Diana's story going forward?
Well, that's a great question, Lydia, and I think it's one of those evergreen stories that's it's still fascinating to me. I mean, I always was, very related to her, even though we have nothing in common as far as, our background and so on. But it seems like a new generation has really just gotten fascinated by her all over again. The Crown, I think, has played a big role with that. Although I really wish people would understand that it is fiction, a lot of it, and it's not, all of the facts aren't real. So please do some research, read my books. But, that's really rejuvenated the interest in her once again. So it's hard to say what the next chapter is going to be for her. I think the next episode of the next season of The Crown is going to be very interesting because it's going to go through a lot of the troubles that Charles and Diana went through with their separation. So how that's going to be treated is going to be interesting to see. Obviously, for me, I would love to see Harry and William back on a friendly footing. That would be the best outcome. I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon. But I think, really, to answer your question, she does seem to be an evergreen icon that even now people are still talking about her and discovering her all over again. So I just hope that keeps her alive.
Well, we've got plenty about Diana on the site. It's been a busy week at royalcentral.co.uk, so there's lots of articles there. And of course, Deb has a number of books available all about Diana on your website, Deb.
Yeah, debstratas.com. You can go there, or Amazon, and would love to have you read them and give me any feedback that you have.
And they're also available in audiobooks now, correct?
Yeah, Diana Spencer in Love is just out in Audible now, so that's brand new. Yeah, so you can listen to it and hear the story all over again.
It is. As you said, it's a story that continues to fascinate and will continue to fascinate, and we'll have lots more on Diana and other royal news on the site in the days and weeks to come, as well as more podcasts for you. But in the meantime, thank you for listening to this podcast, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.